Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Join us at 9 p.m. Eastern for Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are going to break down the top trending headlines, which of course include Trump's Manhattan jury trial. So the case is now in the hands of the jury, and Josh Hammer, who is an attorney and senior editor at large at Newsweek, is going to drop by for his legal analysis of what's going on in the sham trial. But we also have to weigh in on the court of public opinion, because this is all about optics. Our political panel is going to drop by to talk about that. And also from Politico, you will not believe this latest poll that shows Joe Biden utterly tanking with Democrats. When you've lost Politico, you kind of know that you've lost it. But also, Republicans had a very, very good night in the state of Texas last night. Former GOP chairman Matt Rinaldi is going to drop by, and major congratulations to my good friend Katrina Pearson, who's now a state representative out of HD 33. All of this and more, plus some world events coming out of Israel, you're not going to want to miss on Jenna Ellis Tonight, Salem News Channel, 9 p.m. Eastern. See you there. Hi friends, Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing and investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So the jury finally has the case in New York City involving Trump and the hush money trial. So we've received a lot of different reports coming out of various spectators who are in the courtroom, and there were no cameras that were actually allowed, so we didn't get to hear the closing arguments, only people's interpretation of what was said. So joining me now to discuss all this and more is Josh Hammer, who is the senior editor at large for Newsweek. He also hosts the Josh Hammer Show and is an attorney. So Josh, one of the more interesting comments that came out of the courtroom was from Jonathan Turley this morning, who of course is a political commentator, but also a lawyer himself. And I find myself agreeing with a lot of his commentary, but he gave this to Fox News from the courtroom earlier today while the judge was handing down jury instructions. He said, Merchant just delivered the coup de grace instruction. He said there is no need to agree on what occurred. They, the jury, can disagree on what crime was among the three choices. Thus, it means they could split 4-4-4, and he, the judge, will still treat them as unanimous. Turley also said Merchant has instructed that the first count of falsifying business records in the first degree must show that Trump made or caused a false entry to be made. Intent means conscience or a purpose to defraud. Intent does not require an intent to defraud any particular person or entity, but a general intent to defraud. Merchant said that the crime being committed was the New York election law by quote unquote unlawful means. However, that unlawful means is shown when there is a showing of intent to cause actions or the performance of conduct. So all this legalese, though, basically means that the jury doesn't even have to be unanimous on their finding. And this does seem to be the coup de grace of jury instructions. And I can only imagine this must have been heavily litigated.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the whole ball game for the past at least week or so as we approached closing argument, and over the past 24 to 48 hours in particular. This has really been the whole ball game, is that Trump's lawyers are arguing, or have argued properly, albeit it seems they have not done so successfully because of the judge. They have been arguing that you need very specific jury instructions. And, in my commentary, Jenna, for the past month plus, especially on my other show, America on Trial, which I cover the lawfare every day on that show, I've been saying, when is the prosecution going to actually tell us what their theory of the case is? They literally, we are imminently about to get potentially the first ever verdict in the first ever criminal trial of a former president of the United States, and the prosecution has literally not exactly said what their theory of the case is. It is clown car banana republic type stuff, Jen. I have a lot more, impolite things to say about it as well. This is obviously a family show, so I'll keep some of my more colorful comments to myself. But what the judge is doing here is atrocious legal malpractice of the highest degree. Recall, this is obviously a judge who personally donated to Joe Biden in 2020. His daughter, Laura Mershon, works for a company called Authentic Campaigns, which is a massive Democratic fundraising and consultancy platform. She has been fundraising upwards of $100 million, literally based on the fact that her daddy might be the first person to put a former president behind bars. The gag order, how about the gag order? I mean, there's been a sweeping, over-inclusive, unconstitutional gag order on Donald Trump throughout the entirety of this trial that prevents him from criticizing anyone other than the judge and the prosecutor. And now we have the jury instructions. So look, it might be the death blow. It potentially could be, but recall that all you need is one. All you need is one stalwart juror who is able to apply a modicum of intellectual honesty, a modicum of scruples here. One thing that I have been kind of glomming onto as a possible source of consolation and solace throughout this entire farcical proceeding is that there are actually two lawyers who are on the jury pool. Now, admittedly, Jenna, as you know, if there are two lawyers and they're in New York City, if that's your only variable, if that's your only heuristic, then you probably assume, absent evidence to the contrary, that they're probably liberal lawyers. However, they are still lawyers. They still went to law school. They still know that at a bare minimum, when you're asked a legal question, you have to identify what the source of law is. Any legal problem means, let's talk about what the law is. Are we talking about a constitutional provision here, a criminal statute, a civil statute, judge-made common law, international law? What is the source of law? This is literally legal analysis 101. So the fact that there are two lawyers on the jury, I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to say, but you have to think that maybe one of them is going to have like a real kind of heart-to-heart moment with his or her fellow jurors and say, guys, like, what is the law here? So that's kind of what I'm holding out for at this point.
Yeah, and hopefully one of those lawyers would be the jury foreperson who could say, listen, we have to go by the instructions, but we also have to understand, what the law is and actually apply the law to the facts and the evidence that were, or maybe, weren't really well presented. And I was pulling up as you were commenting, Josh, this poll that I had posted earlier on my social media, and if viewers still want to go and engage all the way up through tomorrow at my X handle there, and it's the Trump jury trial prediction. And right now there's about 2,000 or so votes. And the prediction is very split. And so not guilty on all counts is 25%, guilty on all counts is 20%, a mixed bill, guilty on some, not guilty on others is 17%. But a hung jury, fascinatingly enough, to at least the social media world, is sitting at 38%. And, I would find that to be remarkable, that jurors who have sat through a 5+ week trial would actually then, maybe just for political reasons, dig in their heels. But that would take a lot more resolve to not come to a unanimous verdict in the length of time that it would take for them to get to a unanimous verdict, to actually sit there and say, no, we're hopelessly deadlocked. I don't see that as a more likely outcome than a straight guilty or not guilty, or probably a mixed bill. So what's your take on, kind of the social media landscape? And I know we haven't been able to look at and actually view all of the evidence, so we're kind of just going based on speculation. We're not good jurors at this point, but just from the optics in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, I've been saying basically for the past month, I mean, ever since the prosecution made clear that they were not going to actually articulate what their theory of the case is, I've been pretty clear that I do very cautiously, optimistically predict, but very cautiously, I would not bet any sum of money on it, certainly. I do think that a hung jury is likeliest. I agree with the respondents to your social media poll. I think that a conviction is probably not terribly far behind that. It's not going to be an acquittal. It should be an acquittal. It absolutely should be an acquittal. This case is a sham, the likes of which I have probably never seen in my entire adult life following legal affairs. So it absolutely 100% should be an acquittal. But I think you're basically down to a hung jury or a conviction at this point. And, I mentioned those two lawyers who hopefully are going to have those sort of deliberations with their fellow jurors behind closed doors there. There also apparently is one juror. Again, I'm not in the courtroom. I've not been in the courtroom, but I've heard, some people say who have been in the courtroom, they have noticed this one juror who has tended to physically nod along when the Trump lawyers make some of these rudimentary points, who apparently started smiling when JD Vance walked into the courtroom. So I again, this is very kind of tea leaf sifting stuff here. I mean, we're really trying to kind of make a lot of facial expressions and nods and smirks and things like that there. That's ultimately kind of what the jury guessing game ends up being there. But I am cautiously optimistic that just given how farcical this case is, given how Michael Cohen repeatedly beclowned himself on the witness stand, these jury instructions, which are outrageous, the whole totality of the circumstances and the presence of two lawyers does make me cautiously optimistic that maybe there will be a hung jury here. But I certainly would not be the least bit surprised if there were a conviction. And if there's a conviction, by the way, Jenna, I think it will get overturned on appeal. The New York State appellate courts tend to be a little bit more fair than the trial courts there. The question, though, is would the appellate courts actually be able to rule on this prior to the election, or would Donald Trump stand for office this fall as a convicted felon? That is not clear, actually.
Yeah, and that becomes the interesting question as well. If there is a conviction, there were reports that came out yesterday that the Secret Service was actually talking to law enforcement at even Rikers Island, preparing for the possibility that the president would be incarcerated. I think a lot of those headlines were intended to be sort of fantastic, but at the same time, that can be a possibility. And how would that really look when you have or how would that go when you have someone who is a former president who has Secret Service protection potentially getting incarcerated? I think the more likely option would be a sort of home confinement or something like that.
I was at a wedding this past weekend, Jenna, out in Iowa for a good buddy of mine who is the current Solicitor General of Iowa. And given the nature of this wedding, there were a lot of like legals here. And I went up to some people who are friends, acquaintances, and I kind of asked them this question. Actually, I basically said, do you think that they are prepared to actually take the step of physically incarcerating, putting in handcuffs, and sending him to Rikers Island? And they basically said yes. I'm not going to name names, obviously, but these are very esteemed people within kind of the broader legal community. I mean, that is how shaken I think many of us are when it comes to our faith or lack thereof in the criminal justice system, the integrity of the judicial system at this point there. And I guess it kind of makes sense to an extent. They've been building this up for a year and a half, 2 years now, going back at least as far as the August 2022 pre-dawn raid at Mar-a-Lago. That became the classified documents case with Jack Smith. They've been talking about prosecuting for even longer, though, going back to the beginning of the Georgia proceedings with Fani Willis and all that there. How can it not culminate in then putting the nefarious orange man in an orange jumpsuit in handcuffs in Rikers Island if they actually get the guilty conviction? If they get the guilty conviction, which again, I'm very cautiously predicting that they're not going to get, but if they go ahead and get that, Jenna, I think we are totally beyond in uncharted waters at this point there, and they will stop at nothing whatsoever to get that photo op of him in a jail cell.
Wow. And we're under a minute left, Josh. But I mean, in terms of the campaign, or if Trump got elected, I mean, will the Oval Office become a prison cell in Rikers Island? I mean, what are we talking about constitutionally?
So again, it probably will be overturned on appeal, right? You can never count your chickens before they hatch, but that process could be expedited if Donald Trump actually wins the election in November. So you have to assume that he's no longer going to be a convicted felon by the time he actually takes office in January 2025, even if he is actually found convicted here. Worst case scenario, the appellate court has not ruled yet.
Yeah, well, we're out of time, but Josh, I'm going to hold you over to the next segment because there's a lot more to discuss with world politics. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use My Pillows are just $25. My Pillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium My Pillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. Josh Hammer is still with me as we turn to world events. And while the nation's focus is very squarely on New York and what is coming out of that trial, I think that Israel and Gaza is actually the far bigger world story. And so now, just earlier today, Turkey's Erdogan calls on the Islamic world to, quote unquote, take action over Gaza. So, Josh, how do you see the political landscape now with the ICC still potentially imminently issuing arrest warrants for Netanyahu, other Israeli leaders, and then the UN's World Court is trying to tell Israel to halt their war in Gaza and really just halting defending themselves. It seems like a lot of the world and international leaders are attempting to tell Israel you can't defend yourself.
Yeah, I mean, look, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as the longstanding strong man in Turkey, has become one of the leading spokespersons for radical Islam, for the Muslim Brotherhood, for Sunni extremism in general. Under his leadership, Turkey has devolved from a once largely secular state. That was kind of the founding vision of Ataturk, of modern Turkey, after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire in World War I. Turkey was going to be a largely kind of secular-leaning Muslim country, and it really was that way until Erdogan started to take power there in the late 90s, early 2000s. Now, unfortunately, Turkey has become one of the two homes, along with Qatar, of Hamas, of the Muslim Brotherhood. He is a strong man. He jails more journalists than any leader in the entire world there. So, I mean, really, no one should take his message particularly seriously there. This is a guy who openly and proudly stands with Hamas, who has been alleged to stand with much more nefarious figures even than them, such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda over the years as well. Look, when it comes to the so-called international community, you have the ICJ, which has issued a ruling telling Israel to stop its offensive in Rafah. You now have the ICC, which has these criminal warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister. It seems, Jenna, that the so-called modern international community, which ironically and really quite sadly really got its start in its modern form after World War II, and the aftermath of World War II, and the aftermath of all the war crimes in East Asia, and the aftermath of the Holocaust. It's really sad that we've gotten to the point where what it means to be a good standing member of the so-called international community really means to kind of peddle and propagandize Jew hatred, because that really is what the United Nations does on a seemingly daily basis. That is what the ICJ and ICC are doing on a seemingly daily basis as well here. You know, the good news is that I think Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel understand what is happening. They understand the stakes here. And they understand that you can't stop right now. That stopping in Rafah before you eliminate all of the remaining Hamas battalions would be the logical equivalent of the Allied powers after the D-Day invasion of Normandy, stopping short of Berlin, basically stopping in Frankfurt or Dresden or maybe like Antwerp or something like that. But you can't do it. You have to go for the kill shot when you're in an existential wartime footing and your goal is unconditional surrender. So a bit of solace. I did see a quote this morning from the Israeli National Security advisor, who was apparently doing an interview with Khan, which is the public broadcasting service over there. And the national security advisor said that the fighting, probably based on his prediction, is probably going to continue for the rest of the year, for the rest of the calendar year. So, a lot of liberals are not going to like that. A lot of left wingers who are protesting Joe Biden, calling him Genocide Joe, they're not going to like that. The UN's not going to like that. The ICJ is not going to like that. But anyone who has any modicum of moral clarity, who understands that, this really actually is a very clear fight between a Western nation, a very close U.S. ally, and a U.S. designated Hamas foreign terrorist organization. This is about as clear and stark a dichotomy as you will ever find in a foreign policy conflict. And Israel is not going to stop. So it is incumbent upon the Western powers and leaders to stand with them as they embark upon the commencement and the culmination of this war effort.
Yeah, and President Biden certainly is not standing, at least very strongly, with Israel and sending a lot of mixed signals, and I think some very weak signals. And so, I think that this gives a really good opportunity for Donald Trump to engage and participate in this discussion. And if he can kind of take his focus off of New York, and at least in the aftermath of some of these trial proceedings, can focus on some of the world events, could call on Biden to do a lot more and could contrast that with what he would do in his administration. And so, what should the United States, regardless of who's in power, what should the United States morally be doing as a world leader?
Well, beyond just morally, there are some very practical things as well that the United States can and should be doing. So, first of all, don't go around trying to engage in symbolic virtue signaling stunts like these airdrops that the U.S. military was engaging in at Joe Biden's discretion about 2 or 3 months ago. They started to do airdrops in Gaza. Jenna, you do airdrops when you're trying to save people who are being subjugated by an authoritarian power. We did airdrops during the Cold War in places like East Berlin. The fact that the Biden administration was doing airdrops in Gaza as recently as 2 or 3 months ago, which, by the way, tragically ended up killing 5 or 6 Palestinian Arab civilians because apparently America doesn't know how to do airdrops anymore. They literally just fell on people's heads and killed them. It's tragic. But they've done that. They've done this ridiculous pier, $300 to $400 million in this floating pier off the coast of Gaza and Israel that was apparently operationally intact for like 2 or 3 weeks before it just sunk and disintegrated. What an absolute atrocious boondoggle there. So how about we stop doing these virtue signaling stunts and actually just make sure that our allies have the weaponry that they need to take care of the Hamas threat? I should probably remind the viewers here, there are at least 5 remaining hostages in Gaza who are United States citizens. I cannot emphasize this point enough. What Joe Biden is doing when he undermines our ally, when he emboldens a U.S. recognized foreign terrorist organization, is he is not just doing that on its face, which is bad enough. He's also letting American citizens being held hostage go rot. Joe Biden at this point, I don't think it is a stretch to say, could not care less, potentially even worse than that when it comes to the fate of the remaining American citizens who are currently being held hostage there. So make sure that they have the weapons that they need, whether it's small arms, whether it's mortar shells, whether it's rockets, tanks, helicopters, who knows? So make sure that that is in place right now, and make sure also that you're not simultaneously funding Hamas, which the recent congressionally passed boondoggle, that massive aid package, was also funding Hamas in addition to Israel. That's ridiculous. But beyond that, yes, to your question, you absolutely should be rhetorically and morally standing with Israel as well. You should be condemning the ICC, the ICJ. You can issue sanctions to these so-called prosecutors of the ICC, this joke international tribunal that sits in The Hague, Netherlands, and purports to wag its big finger at countries of the world. They have no jurisdiction in Israel. They have no jurisdiction in America because neither country even signed on to the Rome Statute, which implemented the ICC in the first place. So Tony Blinken actually, at a recent hearing, actually sounded somewhat optimistic about maybe joining forces with Republican senators and congressmen to sanction the ICC. That would be a very nice step to take as well, I think.
Yeah, and that would show some a little bit of solidarity and from America rather than all of this partisan divisiveness and so forth. And so what is and we're down to under a minute here, Josh. But what is Israel's best response? Just to ignore some of these arrest warrants, or what are they in the position to do if this is coming from the ICC?
Yeah, they'll basically ignore it. So, the ICC has had a longstanding arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin as well. Obviously, it's insulting to compare Putin to Netanyahu, but they have had an arrest warrant for Putin for a long time. And he hasn't been arrested because you just avoid traveling to these countries that have signed the Rome Statute for as long as the warrant is currently pending. So ideally, America can sanction the ICC and make this warrant go away. In the meantime, Netanyahu should not personally travel to a European country, for instance, that has signed onto the Rome Statute and abides by the dictates of the ICC.
Makes sense. Well, Josh Hammer, always appreciate your commentary. Make sure to read everything that he writes in Newsweek and listen to The Josh Hammer Show. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Hi friends, Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing, and investments in gold and silver, and legacy precious metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you. Well, the state of Texas held their runoffs last night and saw some remarkable wins for stalwart conservatives. A couple of rhino holdovers, unfortunately, but this tweet coming from our friend Corey DeAngelis, who said, "We targeted 13 Texas House Republicans who voted against school choice. 9 of them lost. We defeated 69% of the incumbents we challenged. Incumbents usually win 95% of the time." Governor Abbott said, quote, "The Texas legislature now has enough votes to pass school choice." Political earthquake. Joining me now to discuss is the former Texas State GOP Chair, Matt Rinaldi. So, Matt, thanks so much and congratulations on a bunch of wins. What does the landscape look now for the state of Texas?
Thank you. I mean, it looks great for school choice, but I don't want to give the impression that this was a referendum solely on school choice. That was one of the issues. The other was the Paxton impeachment and, of course, our House Speaker appointing Democrats to powerful chairmanships. And when you look at it, there were 17 total races when you include vacancies and people replaced by conservative challengers. We had 17 moderate incumbents replaced with conservatives. And some of those people who were replaced were endorsed by Governor Abbott, supported school choice. This was an overwhelming referendum for conservative governance.
That's excellent. And so, I mean, this is going to hopefully change the way that the state legislature functions. And as I've been talking, with you, Dawn Huffines, Katrina Pearson, who won her race. I'm so excited for her as a state representative now out of Texas 33. I have learned that the state of Texas, that the Republicans actually appointed Democrats to some of these positions and some of the internal workings of the way that Texas was functioning. So how is it going to be different for the legislature moving forward?
I think the state house and its members are going to have to make a decision now that they want new leadership that's going to empower Republicans and not Democrats. We've heard Governor Abbott talking about this issue on the campaign trail. We've talked about it as the Texas GOP. And what's clear is in this climate where Democrats are putting their political opponents in jail, it is not, it's just not feasible to share power with a party that's vilifying opponents in this way. It's something that could have happened in the past in a different political climate. It just can't happen anymore. And if it does happen again, you're going to see another primary election next time that's just like this one.
Well, and there were a couple of, rhino holdovers, and one of those included Dave Phelan, I think is how you pronounce his last name. I'm kind of bad at that, but
Yeah.
what happened in his race, and why is that important?
What happened in his race is we had thousands of Democrats cross over in the primary in order to save him. David Covey won Republicans overwhelmingly. And that's a problem that we took care of in the recent GOP convention this weekend. We voted for a rule to close the Texas primaries going forward so that Democrats can't cross over and save liberal Republicans anymore.
Wow. And I think there really does need to be a measure to close the primaries, and especially when you have so many of those crossovers. So, do you anticipate that there may be a move in Texas to close the primaries, at least from the Republican side?
We've done it. We did it this weekend. And all we need to
Great.
do is uphold it under a court challenge that we fully expect to happen. I believe the law is on our side, and that closed primaries will be upheld.
Wow, that's really incredible. I mean, that was pretty swift action. And so, how did that come about in just the last about 30 seconds we have with you, Matt Rinaldi?
It was one of my top priorities when I became chair, was to close the primaries. Other states like Idaho did it by party rule rather than by legislation. We just accomplished that this weekend, and we look forward to defending our closed primaries in court, and I think we'll be victorious.
Yeah, I think you will be too. I mean, the Supreme Court has been pretty clear that parties can define their own rules in that regard. So, really well done. Always appreciate you dropping by, and congratulations on keeping Texas red moving forward. And hopefully, we'll see that also in November. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Earlier in the program, we talked about the legal of President Trump's trial, and now in the hands of the jury out of Manhattan. But how is this playing in the court of public opinion, in the polls, and what does this mean actually politically for 2024? Let's welcome in our panel to discuss. We have Mark Lauder, who's the Chief Communications Officer for the America First Policy Institute, AFPI, and also Ryan Fournier, who is the founder of Students for Trump. So, gentlemen, welcome. And, there's been a lot of mixed reaction, I think, from the Trump supporting side. And this particular tweet thread was interesting to me. This was from Timcast. Tim Pool posted earlier this morning, "I hope Trump goes to jail." And then Ashley St. Clair, who's a political influencer, or thinks she is, says, "Would be so awesome for the polls." Ryan, I kind of think these are useful MAGA idiots. This is not a good thing. And maybe they're just trying to front load the narrative to say that, hey, this would be a great thing if Trump actually goes to jail. I think that that's putting politics over principles and virtue. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where they're coming from. I've seen a lot of that. And I think what they're trying to get at with that statement is that by putting him in jail, you're essentially giving him the keys to the White House. I don't think it's going to come to that whatsoever. Merchant has already, sort of made it very clear that that's the last resort if this were to be, a guilty verdict. But I think that they're kind of just speculating here. I don't think it's going to happen. What I think they're trying to get at really is just you do this and he's going to be the next president.
And Mark, is this really, I don't want to say responsible rhetoric, because, obviously social media is not built for responsible political rhetoric. But, this does appear to be just more front loading this, hey, we really think he's going to be convicted. But how do you react to something like that?
Well, I hate to see the weaponization of our justice system for politics, whether it is the left weaponizing the system against Donald Trump, or we shouldn't try to use the outcome of this trial to influence. And I don't think any of it actually will. Look, when people go to the polls, I think they're going to vote not on the outcome of this trial or the trials that should be taking place with the Biden crime family. It should be who's going to lower gas and grocery prices, who's going to seal the border, who's going to deal with the wars that are raging in Europe and in the Middle East. And the answer is not Joe Biden. I think that's what this issue in this election should be about, not about some trial in May or June whenever we get a verdict, or the verdicts in the Hunter Biden scandal trials that are coming up next month and again in September.
Yeah, and to your point, the Democrats are really concerned that they have literally zero message. They have nothing in terms of policy for the American people. And in fact, this was a headline coming from Politico just earlier yesterday. Dems in full-blown freak out over Biden. I mean, when you've lost Politico, it's really bad, but Dems in full-blown freak out over Biden. A pervasive sense of fear has settled in at the highest levels of the Democrat Party over President Joe Biden's reelection prospects, even among office holders and strategists who had previously expressed confidence about the coming battle with Donald Trump. And then the Washington Examiner had this headline and statistics: the majority of Democrats, 54%, say to dump Biden. I mean, Mark, that's really not good for Democrats, regardless of what happens in the Trump trial.
No, this is beyond the normal Democrat bedwetting over their candidate, which they do just about every cycle. I mean, you actually have named Democrats, and not just James Carville and Axelrod, but named people who currently work in Democrat politics, coming out and saying what a disaster Joe Biden is. And the fact of the matter is that there's not enough time left to change the narrative. People, it takes a while for them to feel economic change. And even if Joe Biden sealed the border tomorrow, which he won't do, it still does nothing about the 11 million people who are here illegally. So Joe Biden is out of time to be able to change the way people feel about his leadership. They don't like his leadership. They do like what they remember from Donald Trump. And when you look at the polls nationally, the swing states, and now a growing number of states, saw a poll today out of Roanoke saying Virginia is tied. This thing is going down quickly for Joe Biden in favor of Donald Trump.
So, Ryan, do you think that the Trump campaign, and particularly Trump himself, who does prolifically post on Truth Social, is missing a big messaging opportunity? Because when there is such myopic focus on what's happening in Manhattan, then everybody's attention is on Manhattan. I mean, should the wider Trump campaign focus more on these types of issues and just kind of say, who cares about this sham nonsense that's going on? We care about the country, and put that more in the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, if you keep your ear close to the ground on K Street, and you'll hear some of the whining from the consultants who are helping some of these Democrats. They really do not believe in his strategy. People are not really tuned into the trial, though. That's one thing. If you look at the polling, and I believe it was New York Times of all people who released a poll saying that 65% of Americans are looking at the number one issue for them, watching TV, watching it about economy and inflation, right? When you look at the numbers of people who are tuning into the trial, it's about 41 to 42%. People just don't care. They care about, coming home, being able to put food on the table, spend time with their families, not worrying about the crime in the neighborhoods around them, not having to worry about, being able to afford gas to get to work. These are things people are actually caring about. They're not really tuned into this stuff. And, when you look at, the closing arguments of this case, I mean, Trump is having to be in this courtroom as opposed to campaigning. And I think a lot of people understand that, and a lot of people get that. He's been able to put out messaging. He's been able to do these videos, do stuff on Truth Social, do stuff on Instagram. But I do believe there's going to have to be a more campaign aspect to this when this is all said and done. And I do believe the campaign is going to be ramping things up, doing much more rallies, similar to what we saw in 2016, right before the election. I think he did like 4 rallies in one day. I think that's probably the strategy that they're going to be taking after this, because I agree. I mean, he has to get out there, but he is in this situation where he has to be in this courtroom. But on the other hand of that, Biden isn't even campaigning. He's going to Pennsylvania to try to get, black votes. But when you look at the minority voters, we haven't seen the numbers that we've seen now since probably Richard Nixon, where you're looking at 30% of African Americans turning their backs to Joe Biden. Young people, young voters, Gaza has split that vote, taken away votes from Biden. Begrudgingly, a lot of people who do not like Donald Trump are looking and saying, okay, maybe we need this guy back again to challenge the status quo and to challenge the establishment in this country and what they've done.
Yeah, and I agree with you that I hope that the Trump campaign does get out there in terms of messaging and putting this type of economy and the border and all of these issues that the American people really care about more front and center. And I think, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, that people don't necessarily care about the Trump trial because they've already made up their minds. I mean, they're very interested in the verdict, and they're still kind of paying attention to it, but ultimately, we care about what affects us the most. But Mark, that's so different than what all of the conservatives and the Republicans, the wider GOP base, was focused on during the GOP primary that was so hotly contested. I mean, the whole, I will have revenge and that kind of whole narrative from Trump really played into his runaway success in becoming the presumptive nominee. So, how has that script flipped?
Well, running in the primary is a lot different than running in the general election. And so right now, you're not focused on necessarily your base. The base is there. You'll still continue to coalesce that base between now and election day. Now's the time to start winning over those undecided, those moderates. And when you look at in the last 2 weeks, Trump had 25,000 people in the Bronx, 107,000 people in New Jersey. He went to the Libertarian Party convention. He went up to Minnesota. He's growing the map, growing the base. And one of the things you have to do when you're attracting people who might have a history of voting the other side is let them come to this decision on their own. If you force the issue too fast, too hard, they'll retreat back into their partisan corners. But as they just continue to get more and more angry about prices, about the border, about the wars, they will become more naturally receptive to your audience. And so what I think Trump is doing is letting every gas station sign in America serve as a campaign billboard against Joe Biden. He can seal the deal when people get to the polls in that month, 2 months before we go to the election. Right now, just let them be angry and remind them it's Joe Biden's fault.
Yeah, I love those stickers that, Joe did that or I did that that are put up, and nobody should do that. That's defacing public property, but they're funny anyway. So, gentlemen, Mark Lauder and Ryan Fournier, I'm going to hold you over into the next segment because we have even more to talk about with the upcoming debate between Trump, Biden, and will RFK Jr. participate. We'll be right back. We are back with our political panel, Mark Lauder and Ryan Fournier, and we need to discuss the upcoming debate because the trial will be over by then and the Democrats will still be in full-blown freakout mode. And yet this debate is coming well before either of the conventions for the DNC or the RNC. So, Mark Lauder, what does Donald Trump need to do at this debate to win?
He needs to stay focused on the policies and stay out of Joe Biden's way. Joe Biden will screw this up on his own. I don't know if he can literally, create a 2-minute answer. Who knows if it'll be factual or not? The interview with Caitlin Collins or Aaron Burnett a few weeks ago on CNN showed you that he struggles with the facts, struggles with the truth. So let Joe Biden be Joe Biden. Don't get in his way. Remind people you were better off. But here's the big challenge for Biden that no other Democrat president that I can recall here recently has had to go through, neither Barack Obama nor Bill Clinton. Neither of them were blamed for the economic problems that they inherited. They blamed George H.W. Bush. They blamed George W. Bush. People blame Joe Biden for the economic and the border problems he's created. So he doesn't get runway to claim improvement or we're on the right track. No, you created this. Huge problem for Joe Biden. Make him own it.
Yeah, well, Ryan, the debate does seem tilted in Biden's favor just in terms of the home turf, which is CNN's moderators. So have we set the bar kind of too low that if Biden just gets up, doesn't read from a teleprompter, and is reasonably coherent, kind of like, Fetterman versus Oz, like if he just shows up and proves he's alive, then, hey, this is a phenomenal success. Should we expect more? And how can the Trump campaign set up those optics?
Well, I think here Mark makes a good point. I think we said in 2020, let Biden speak. That is the way you defeat him. More so now than before. Look at his record. Now he has a record that we can attack. Unlike, when you look at the presidencies of Obama or, even Bill Clinton, we didn't have these immigration issues that we have now. I mean, cities like New York, Detroit, California are experiencing upending because of what's going on with immigration. And even, Eric Adams, who comes out every now and again and says, oh, we have a problem. And then all of a sudden the FBI raids one of his, employees' houses. He gets pulled back into the corner. But these are things Biden is going to have to answer for. And I think that the key critical point here is that every time you see him on TV, he cannot remember the facts. He can't remember the numbers. He doesn't even know if a certain policy was passed or not. So these are big critical things that Trump is going to be able to attack him on. I think the campaign, keep, Trump in a way where he's talking about the policies and stuff. I'm sure he's going to go into a little bit of the Hunter Biden thing. But I think if we focus on the policy, focus on what Biden has lacked to do in the last 4 years, nothing is built back better. Nothing has returned to normalcy. In fact, everything has been the complete 180 compared to what he said in his DNC speech or what he even said in past debates against President Trump. So I think that it's all in our favor. It's ours to lose. We have to call him out on all the BS that he's promised and not delivered on over the last 4 years.
Yeah, and there's someone on this show yesterday that was saying that Trump should just totally make fun of Biden, like walk out onto the stage, looking an ice cream cone and just completely making fun of him. And I'm thinking, that's really what Trump does best. And when he uses his humor and his wit to then weave in some of that policy that really resonates with people, I think that's when Trump is absolutely at his best. But Mark, let's talk about the RFK Jr. factor, because I think that he should participate in the debate. He's going to be on the ballot if probably in all 50 states. Do you think that he deserves to be on that stage?
I think if you qualify to get to the 270 electoral college votes that it needs to win, and you get to that minimum threshold, I think most are saying it's 15%, then I think you've put yourself on the debate stage. That's what democracy is about. And much like the Democrats wanted to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, now they want to keep RFK off the debate stage. They don't want democracy. They say they're defending democracy while they're literally taking people's ability to practice democracy away from them. So, look, I have no problem with RFK Jr. being up there. I think it's Democrats who do. And so ask yourself, who's the real threat to democracy here?
Yeah, really, really good question. And if we answer that honestly, I think we all know that answer. And we have just about a minute left. And Ryan, does RFK Jr. present a very interesting conundrum for both candidates, because he's probably the only one that is going to talk about COVID response that both the Trump and Biden administrations do have some, failures that they haven't really taken accountability for. Certainly, I'm not comparing them or equating the two, but there are some hot topics there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of RFK, but I agree with Mark that he should be up on the stage if he, meets the threshold. I mean, that's democracy. That's how we have the system set up here. I think that if anybody is going to vote more for RFK, it would probably be a Biden voter or a libertarian. But I think Trump kind of got the shoe in with the libertarians when he talked about, the pardons, when he talked about Julian Assange. These are things that libertarians really care about. So I think that he's going to get more.
And we're going to have to leave it there, Ryan. So
Trump
sorry to cut you off,
vote.
but gentlemen, thanks so much. And we are all out of time for Jenna Ellis Tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more.